September 10th is observed as World Suicide Prevention Day, with this year's theme focusing on changing the narrative on suicide. Suicide remains a significant public health crisis in India, which records one of the highest suicide rates globally. In 2022 alone, the National Crime Records Bureau reported that 1.71 lakh individuals died by suicide in the country. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death among adolescents aged 15 to 19, with over 40% of suicide cases involving young adults under 30. Joining us today is Divya Tiwari, an RCI licensed clinical psychologist with vast expertise in issues such as depression, anxiety, substance abuse, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder. Currently serving as the head of therapy at MindPeers, she will help us explore the complexities and narratives surrounding suicide in India. Thank you so much, Divya, for joining us today. And
Thank you.
firstly,
Thank you for
we
having me.
want to know, why do we have such a high suicide rate? Why is our country having such a high suicide rate? If you could tell us.
Sure, of course. I'd be happy to start there. So there are a lot of reasons for why that is. I think one of the biggest reasons behind that is, I think, something that we all know as well, the stigma. Often it happens that people who really need help don't get that on time because of, what will people say, what will society think, what will my family think. There are so many clients that come to us that actually don't want their families to know. By law and by ethical obligations, we're required to get emergency contacts. And so frequently, it's very difficult for people to even give us a contact like that, because they don't want it known to people in their life that, they might be facing something like that. So stigma is definitely a big one. Of course, there has been a lot of light on this recently, that the balance between the number of professionals needed to attend to
Hmm.
all of the people who have mental health concerns is actually very off base, right? So there are so many more people who need help, and there are very, very few people. And I mean, thankfully, that is starting to gain a lot more a lot more visibility. And I think RCI is also trying to make education a lot better for psychologists to different people with mental health concerns. But yeah, I think those two are probably one of the biggest reasons. Of course, affordability of healthcare and accessibility to healthcare, particularly mental health care, is also, it's still difficult despite so many online platforms, like MindPeers, for that matter. People don't always know that they should come to us, or they don't always know what therapy would look like, and things like that. So I think that psychoeducation, information about the healthcare aspect, I think that is also fairly lacking.
But what leads to suicide? Like, even if we understand at this level that there is a difference in the gap between professionals,
Yeah,
there is stigma, they might not be able to seek help. But what
yeah.
leads a person to suicide? Like, at least in some
Hmm.
cases, like in farmers' suicide rate, we have a clear-cut research where we get to know that the loans, financial, the overall burden through the system is one of the major causes. But
Yeah.
in terms of adolescence, someone from privileged background, what could be the causes? Like, what have you seen commonly?
So, I mean, it's a complicated subject, right? I mean, there are a lot of reasons. One that you pointed out is, unfortunately, a fairly common one, where because of societal burdens, because of, problems like finances or legal issues, people do end up taking their own life. Of course, unfortunately, as we have seen, cases of suicide are so much more common in students and young adults who are just starting out. Again, the reason for that is multifold. A lot of times it does come from not having enough support within the family, not having enough opportunities to speak up about the issues that somebody might be facing, just generally not being able to talk about having such feelings or having difficult feelings at all. Apart from that, obviously there is a little bit of a clinical aspect as well. So as we know, or as professionals will tell you, that most cases where somebody is suffering from very severe depression, or somebody is suffering from something like bipolar disorder, they might be more at risk for dying by suicide, because the feelings and the helplessness just gets so intense that it becomes very difficult to see hope out of, a difficult situation. And it's one thing when it's a social situation that's going wrong and that's making you feel helpless, but when it's like this internal voice that's constantly getting so hateful or so negative, it is very difficult to tone it down. And that is primarily the reason, not having a lot of support system, not having a lot of people or systems to rely on, not being able to speak up about the problem, also having risky situations such as abuse or domestic assault and things like that. Those all complicate matters a lot more. But I think for like foremost, if I had to point down 2 points, I think anybody who finds themselves in a hopeless or helpless sort of situation, I think is definitely more at risk. That is usually what leads to something like suicide.
Extreme measures.
Yeah.
Also, what are some of the common myths that are around suicide in India? Like we spoke about stigma, but one thing that
Yeah.
we commonly hear is that it's a very spontaneous decision. Like they might
Hmm.
not have thought about it. Is that
Yeah.
true? Like, if you
Hmm.
could bust some myths for us that are commonly
Yeah.
held.
Absolutely. I think in addition to the one that you mentioned, that it's an impulsive act, it's a spur of
Mhm.
the moment thing. That's actually not true. Most people who, I mean, of course, there are people like that as well who end up taking that extreme step in an impulse. But there are a lot of people who do put thought into it, and there are a lot of people who consider planning before they go forward with it. In fact, when we talk about what we consider risk factors, we actually have levels. We actually look at how intense the thought is, how much planning the person might have into it, has there been an action, things like that. But coming to the myths, right? One of the more common ones that I've heard, unfortunately, is that it's just for attention, or that it's just
Right.
somebody trying to get sympathy, or something like that. Then there is also obviously the more negative one, that is just a step that weak people take. I feel like that's
Hmm.
not even an Indian
Hmm.
thing. I feel like that's an international global thing. But of course, all of these different myths around it, all of them are false, and for various reasons. That when somebody is taking such an extreme step, it doesn't really involve a lot of weakness. In fact, it does involve a lot of forethought. For a lot of those people, it involves thinking about all of the consequences of taking such an
Hmm.
extreme step. So yeah, so speaking of myths around suicide, I think one of the most common ones is the one that you talked about, that it's just something that people do impulsively, people do out of instinct. But that's not, obviously that's not true, because it does involve forethought, it does often involve planning, it does often involve getting access to fatal measures, as we call them, lethal means. But apart from that, I think two myths I've seen very commonly is that people do it for attention. People are just looking to get sympathy or things like that. But and apart from that, a global thing that I've seen a lot is just saying that somebody who's taking their life is just weak, or is not able to be strong, as we put it. Because I mean, we as a culture, or for that matter globally, people put a lot of
Hmm.
emphasis on, if you can't tolerate mental health issues, or if you can't tolerate
Hmm.
bad emotions, you're not strong. So of course, that's it's a very complicated situation when somebody is thinking of, or acting on suicidal impulses or suicidal thoughts. It involves a lot of thought. Unfortunately, it involves a lot of planning as well. A lot of times the instinct, there are of course cases where people act on impulse, but very often for people it ends up being something that, when they don't see a way out, this is the only option that's sometimes left on the table for people, because they're not able to get out of, like I said, that helpless hopeless cycle. And when it comes to the whole narrative that people are doing it for attention, they're weak, things like that. I mean, we have to imagine that somebody has been tolerating such high intensity emotion for such a long time. How could they possibly be weak? That's obviously a lot of strength of character. And sometimes everybody runs out of strength. And that's, I think, more likely what's happening with people who are ending up acting on those thoughts. That, there's just, sometimes it just seems for people like there's no way out. And that's one thing that we want to change with therapy and with professional help, that just creating that way out, so to speak. So yeah.
So it's completely false that people do it for attention
Absolutely.
or just
Absolutely.
they are not able to handle it emotionally weak. That's completely a
Yes.
false thing to say. Also,
Absolutely.
are women, do they have other risk factors involved? Because some research studies showed that women, usually younger women, as
Hmm.
compared to men, they tend to do they tend to commit suicide more than men. Are there any specific reasons for that? And in India also, does that happen from your experience?
So I actually, whatever research I've done, I've actually noticed that it tends to be the other way around. And most throughout most of my education, that is something that we've focused on quite a bit. The gender gap, and in fact, we've always thought that one big reason for that was that women are able to speak up a lot more. Women tend to externalize their emotions a lot more, and whatever cases there are where women are tending to take their own lives more than men do, it tends to come from, again, very stifled, very restricted living situations, not really being able to do much for themselves,
Mm.
not really having a lot of support from family, and being forced into or pressured into making life decisions. So those are all risk factors. However, in terms of study, I feel like I'll have to look at the latest epidemiological studies, but from what we've seen in terms of trends, we found that men tend to be more at risk in general. And it is probably why we are also trying to get more psychoeducation, more information going about men's mental health, because men need to speak up a lot more. They do need to come to professionals a lot more. Other than that, in terms of risk factors, we look at lifestyle, we look at age, we look at support systems, so familial as well as friends, social life, work life. People who tend to be more isolated, people who tend to
Mm.
not have a lot of relationships, obviously are a little bit more at risk. But we've also found that, like I said earlier, I mentioned that people who, for example, suffer from bipolar disorder might
Yeah.
be a little bit more at risk, because their extremes of mood are just
Mm.
so diverse, right? Like, it's very low and very high. And so when somebody comes down from like a very high mood to like a very low mood, that is in itself a very big risk factor. So for somebody with very severe bipolar disorder or moderate to severe bipolar disorder, it tends to be a higher risk than somebody with, let's say, very severe depression, because with
Mm.
depression, unfortunate as it is, the lack of energy, motivation
Mm.
tends to
Yeah.
save people a lot of times. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
with people whose moods are very volatile, it tends to be a lot more
Mm.
risky.
Also, what are the warning signs of someone being suicidal? And let's talk about both. One, in the case of not somebody who's suffering from as severe as
Yeah.
bipolar or severe depression, somebody who seems to
Yeah.
be, let's say, normal in the
Okay.
setting, in the social
Hmm.
settings, and somebody who is already
Yeah.
suffering, who has the
Hmm.
diagnosis, to be very
Yeah.
precise. What are the warning signs
Yeah.
in both the cases?
Makes sense. All right. I think that's a valid question, and one that I do get asked fairly frequently. Couple of things to look out for, right? If there is somebody who's suddenly seeming very, seeming like they're having a lot of conversations about goodbyes, or somebody who's suddenly getting very emotional about meeting their friends, meeting their family, somebody who's maybe giving things away, someone that might be suddenly seeming a little bit withdrawn, or for that matter, suddenly very social, very engaged, trying to plan a lot of nights out, or times out, dinners, like, oh, let's just do this, it's been very long, I don't know when we'll get to do this again, that sort of language. A lot of times that can be an indication. Other than that, there is something that we call masked depression, which means that those negative emotions and thoughts are there, but you can't really tell. Like you said, there isn't a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So a lot of times depression is not very evident.
Mm.
Couple of things that we can still look out for is if the person is maybe not engaging as much in things that they used to enjoy that much,
Mm.
if it seems like they're able to do all their work and coming to work regularly,
Mm.
etc., but maybe they're not as engaged as they used to be. Maybe their conversations have changed in terms of
Yeah.
content. Maybe they used to talk about future a lot, or maybe they would talk about, oh, we'll do this next week or next month. Maybe that's not happening that much anymore. You will typically see change in these little things. It's not something very significant, it's very micro. It's very, very little minute changes here
Mm.
and there. People tend to get a lot more sentimental as well if that sort of thought is circling around in their mind. But yeah, those are just some of the things that we can look out for. If people are seeming like they're doing these wrap up sort of conversations, remembering and not being very nostalgic, remembering old things, or remember that one time, becoming very sentimental like that as well. Those
Mm.
are all things that we can look out for. Obviously we have to contextualize it, ki
Yeah.
if something difficult has happened with this person, then even
Mm.
more so this is important to pay attention to. Yeah.
So in general, if people observe their loved ones or just their people around
Yeah.
them more closely, it's most
Yeah.
likely that they will be able to help them or at least
Definitely.
understand, pick up on these signs mainly.
Yeah, like at least this sort of thing enables loved ones and friends to be able to at least say that, hey, we haven't really spoken in a while. Let's say that there is somebody who's preparing for an exam and they
Yeah.
suddenly start seeming like this.
Mm.
Maybe a conversation simply about, oh, you must be under a lot of pressure, do you want to talk about it,
Yeah.
do you want to talk about any anxiety or sadness you might be feeling. Just something simple like that, just giving an out, like I said in the beginning, that just
Yeah.
giving an option that you can talk to me if you want.
Hmm.
So
So
yeah.
here, like probably the people they can just help in the first step would be to be able to give them that space and just ask, not
Yeah.
in a very extreme way, but in a very simple
Yeah.
manner, allowing them to say that, oh, you have the space
Mhm.
to talk to me. That would help.
Exactly.
What
Opening the
could,
door, so to speak.
yeah, and what
Yeah.
could be the other ways that somebody can help someone
Hmm.
who's suicidal? You know,
Okay, so one of the most important things is to keep an eye out. And I know this sounds very difficult to hear, it will, but removing any access to any things that can be used to hurt yourself, right? So maybe just keeping an eye out for pills, medicines, knives, making sure that if somebody is living at a height, then making sure that that person is not left unsupervised in that area, ensuring that somebody is around. I'm not saying that you have to be in the same room next to the person all the time, but just making sure that somebody is around, just making sure that somebody is kind of aware of where this other person is, somebody who might be having such thoughts. Keeping an eye out for any major changes in behavior, like I said, right, that giving things away, having these goodbye conversations, etc. In that situation, it can be helpful to have maybe a little one step further conversation, instead of just saying that you've been going through a difficult time, how are you feeling. Maybe just saying something like, we really care about you, or that it's always an option for you to talk to a professional. Maybe even for that matter, keeping some numbers, some access to professionals handy, so that
mm,
you don't have to think about it at the last minute, because
mm,
often it becomes very difficult that you have to suddenly think about, oh, where am I
mm,
going to find a therapist, where will I find a psychiatrist. It's always good to make sure that if you have somebody around you that you worry might take this step, you also have to be prepared in terms of having such contacts ready, having an idea
mm,
about the mental health care setup around you wherever you live, making sure that what you would do, like having like an emergency plan sort of. So we usually do safety planning when we do therapy with people who have negative thoughts of suicide or self harm. We do something called safety planning. One of the things that we like to involve in that, or we ideally want to involve, is somebody in the person's life who cares about them, and we try to ensure that that person is able to reach out to us as therapists. They're
mm,
able to reach out to their primary care physicians, their psychiatrists, any people in their mental health care team. So we always try to make sure of that. And if this person is not going to therapy, then that's something you can do on your own as well. That, make sure that you're aware of the healthcare system around you, so to
Mm.
speak. But yeah, just most of all, removing access, I think, is the
Yeah.
most important part. Removing access, keeping an eye out. Better safe than sorry, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, you mentioned about the safety plan. Now, for somebody who has suicidal thoughts, let's say they're
Yeah.
able to identify these thoughts,
Hmm.
what could be the safety plan intervention that they can take apart from
Yeah.
having at least contacting a mental health
Yeah.
professional, and also
Yeah.
considering the cases where few people might not be able to afford it, like some students, most
Absolutely.
likely we usually see after some competitive exams where we have always seen that
Yeah.
there's a very high suicide rate among students, and they
Yeah.
might not be even aware that there are therapists for this.
Yeah.
So in such cases, what can be the safety plan intervention for them?
Right. I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I would love to tell people about it. So, couple of things to keep in mind when it comes to having a thought of suicide. Something so extreme, or self harm for that matter.
Yeah.
A lot of times, it's important that you stop. Caring about, oh, I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. For example, watching a TV show for hours on end. A lot of times, there are behaviors that people ideally don't want to do in their daily life, like watching something, or engaging with, we're spending a lot of time with friends, instead of doing something around the house. All of those behaviors are perfectly acceptable and allowed when you're having thoughts like self harm or suicide, right? So engage in whatever behaviors you want that take your mind away from it. Usually when we talk about mental health concerns, we talk about, oh, distracting yourself is not a good enough
Yeah.
solution. But in this situation, it absolutely is. Distract yourself all that you can. You watch whatever you want. You stay in bed for as long as you want to. Please give in to any such typically lazy activities or time waste
Mhm.
activities. That's completely fine. One of the other things is making sure that you try and get to a public point, like a public place. So go to a cafe, go to a restaurant. Just, I mean, if you live in a city where there are parks, etc., then go
Mhm.
there and be there. Basically, be around people even if you don't know them. It's completely okay to be around strangers. Just be in a public space where you can sit, right? You can sit and you can just be isolated, that's fine, but just be around people. Other than that, it's important that if you're having such thoughts and you've not gotten to the point where you're maybe thinking about fatal means or how you would take such a step, make a list of all the things that do give you some amount of pleasure. Again, it can be long term sense mate, can be self destructive, that's fine. Like watching things for hours, for example.
Yeah.
That's okay. As long as you like doing something, make a list of those things and make sure you engage in them when you have such
Mhm.
thoughts. If somebody consumes any substances, like alcohol
Mhm.
or drugs or anything like that, trying to make sure that you stay away from them, and making sure that you try and make an effort to hang out with people or be with people who don't usually use those substances.
Consume this, yeah.
Because somebody who's having those thoughts, if you hang out with even more people who use that, likely that you are going to end up using too much and it might hurt you. Apart from that, having a contact of somebody that you can reach out to and kind of making this little promise with yourself that, fine, this is a thought that exists, this is an option that is out there, fine, but before I take any extreme measures, I will call this person, I will do these things, I will try and go to a public place, and I will see how it feels. Apart from that, I do want to highlight there are a lot of free crisis intervention helplines. Making sure that you have access to those, write down those numbers somewhere. Ideally, you should have your safety plan somewhere you can see it immediately. So, not having
Mhm.
it written down in a diary that's in your bookshelf somewhere, have it, right there on
Mhm.
top of your wall or something. Or on your phone for that matter. Everybody has access to that. But yeah, so having those numbers, right off the bat so that you can just dial and call. And apart from that, also, fortunately, there are affordable options more and more now, right? So for example, I mean, at Mindpeers we have affordable options as well as high end ones. So we have a pretty wide range of people starting at 500 rupees, and we go up to more as well. But we there are a lot more affordable options like that, as like such as Mind Peers. So it is important that when you have thoughts like that, it I have to reiterate the need for professional support. Because yes, while you can avoid such thoughts in a given moment, long term speaking, it is something that
Yeah.
needs that professional support. So yeah.
Also, having a support system in terms of friends or family is something they
Absolutely.
should always keep in touch.
Definitely. Yeah. Exactly. Absolutely.
Also, I wanted to know, with the social media, has the narrative, because people think that, they check the follows and we're like, oh, I have it, I can reach out to somebody. There's so many people who say that you can reach out to me. What's the narrative around that? Do you think, has it changed? Has it made it better? Has it made it worse? Because people tend to be
Yeah.
so social on social media, but in real life they might feel so lonely, and they might not have
Yeah.
anybody despite having X number of followers. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I
what do
think
you?
you're absolutely right about that. So sorry. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. The number of followers does not equal number of friends. And, while it's one thing to say that you can reach out to me, I do agree with you. The narrative has changed a lot more. Since the pandemic, I think people have become a lot more social as well, especially on social media. Unfortunate as it is, there is still a lot of misinformation out there in the guise of psychoeducation or disguised as advice and things like
Hmm.
that. So one thing I do want to clarify, while I'm talking to you, that any information that you get from social media, you have to take from with a grain of salt. So any conversation, there are very dark corners of the internet as well, where information and conversations like this are a lot darker. So if you find yourself in such sites or such social media hangouts, make
Hmm.
sure that you go away from them first of all,
Hmm.
because it's really not worth getting information from
True that.
places like that. But apart from that also, it doesn't matter how many followers one has. Obviously that narrative is completely wrong, and it is important that you identify somebody within your familial or social support system, so that when you need to absolutely speak to somebody, you don't have to rely on somebody that you've never met, somebody that doesn't know your life
Hmm.
story, somebody that doesn't know your very unique struggles. I think all of us are aware that the front that we put on social media is not always who we are. And
Yeah.
so you have to also remember that if you're going to even reach out to somebody that is completely online, they may also not be very trustworthy people. Because unfortunately, again, there are a lot of people who just want to take advantage of situations like
Hmm.
this,
Your
right?
vulnerability.
Like
Yeah.
people prey on vulnerability, exactly. And so you never know when you're going to find somebody like that. And so it's well and good to have conversations about mental health. I absolutely support that, I encourage that. But when it comes to serious stuff like this, it's always better to rely on somebody that you know and can trust, to a large degree at least. So yeah.
Also, I would want to know, how does one cope with the suicide of a loved one? Let's say somebody died by suicide. How does one? Because even in that, I feel like the family, the friends, there's so much societal pressure in India
Absolutely.
where they are blamed. There's a lot of blame game happening.
Yes.
There's a lot of stigma around that also. How
Yeah.
does one cope in case of that?
So again, very definitely a very heavy experience. It's what we call traumatic. That is very true and real trauma. The most important thing to remember is that it's not your fault, right? Like if you have somebody in your life who has taken such an extreme step, you have to know that everything that was in your power you did. That's number one. Secondly, obviously, professional support is something one should seek in that situation. But one more thing to remember is, and we talk about this when we do grief counseling, when we talk about grief, we talk about this, that hindsight is 2020, right? It's a very common saying. So it is a very true phenomena when we talk about very big loss. When
Hmm.
you lost somebody to big major disaster or suicide for that
Hmm.
matter, it often feels like, oh, we could have done this, we could have done that,
Yeah.
I should have done this, I should have done that. And the problem is that's called like a hindsight bias. Okay, we call that a hindsight bias, which means that when you're looking back, you're always more biased, right? And that is also why people play that blame game, like you said, that everybody is blamed, from friends to
Hmm.
family to strangers, everybody.
Hmm.
The reason for that is that I think humanity in general wants to understand why something happened so that they can prevent
Hmm.
it from happening again.
Hmm.
And you can't understand why something happened until you start blaming somebody.
Hmm.
Because, oh, you didn't support them enough, that's why they did this. Next time we can prevent it by supporting them enough.
Yeah.
There is a way to say that without going into blame.
Hmm.
Just trying to reframe that narrative to say something along the lines of, this was a very unfortunate thing that happened, it was a very difficult thing, we now need to focus on getting better ourselves and dealing with this so that this doesn't happen again.
Hmm.
So we can prevent something really bad from happening without doing the blame thing, because that just makes matters worse. So
Hmm.
telling yourself that it's not your fault, everything that you had in your power you did, not trying to look back, figure out what went wrong, because there will never be an answer for it.
Hmm.
When you look back, you will never find an answer, because what's happened is already happened.
Yeah.
You can't go back and change things and see how it turns out. So there's no way to prove, how you could have done things differently. So remembering that is also very, very important. All of those things, I think, are a good place to start.
Also, what can the government or the larger system, let's say, workplaces or even schools for
Yeah,
that matter, can take to
yeah,
prevent suicide?
right. Again, very, very important question, because this is something we need to address systemically, considering the
Mhm.
rise in numbers. One of the things I remember, I think this was around a couple of years ago. I remember there were a lot of cases like this in Kota or one of these educational
Yeah,
places. And I remember reading after that fans were removed from, students'
yeah,
rooms and things like
quota,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, right. So, and I remember that in the mental health, my colleagues community, basically there was a lot of debate around why this was right versus why
Mm.
this was wrong. Some people said that this is not nearly enough of a systemic change, while some people were
Yeah.
like, at least it's a step. Yeah. So
Mm.
I feel like I do lean towards the latter a little bit. I do think that at least it was something, but at the same time I
Yeah.
do definitely think that there needs to be a little bit of policy change. There needs to be more psycho education from the government's end,
Mhm.
right? So one thing that I think the government is trying to do, where I can give them credit, is ensuring that there are enough professionals. Maybe that's
Mm.
not worked out ideally yet. We've not been able to gain a lot of clarity about how it's going to go forward. That's okay,
Yeah.
but at least that conversation has started, and I would like for that conversation to happen more. Setting down very clear guidelines about what kind of professional can deal with
Mm.
cases where there is suicide intent, self-harm intent, setting down very clear boundaries and regulations, and then sticking to it, enforcing it. Because
Mm.
right now the implementation is also poor. There are a lot
Yeah.
of professionals who are maybe not equipped to
Equipped.
handle such,
True.
yeah, clients, but there isn't really a lot that's being done about that. So that
Yeah.
is very important. Apart from that, I think on a school, college, workplace level, again, mental health conversation needs to happen to the point where it's seen as a must have. Mental health support in schools, in colleges, open conversations around them, policies that are built around them. So for example, not penalizing a student that's been going through a lot of pressure, has maybe failed a couple of
Mm.
exams, not putting them
Mm.
under more pressure, and making them come to classes, making them putting them on deadlines, things like that. Instead of that,
Yeah.
teachers need to be, I think, we say that doctors need to have a bedside manner. I think right now, where we're
Yeah.
at in our society, all of us need to have a bedside manner in general. Because again, you never know who might be going through something like that. So teachers need to have a, bedside manner. They need to have those inbuilt values where they are able to be people that students can reach out to. For that matter, bosses at work need to be people that employees are
Mm.
able to reach out to and say that, hey, I need time off, or that, hey, I need some support. That openness is something that will only come
Mm.
from creating such policies and actually adhering to them. A lot of it you can lead by example, talking about your own issues and things like that. Like that is something that we do
Yeah.
a lot at Mind Peers, and I think if we can do that outside of Mind Peers as well, and obviously there are a lot of organizations who are doing that. Create that we
Yeah.
have partners that take this conversation very seriously. I think
Mm.
it would be great if more institutions and organizations did that.
So basically, creating a support system and opening doors in general or in the
Yes,
society to have conversations would help us a lot.
absolutely. Absolutely, just
Thank you.
not tiptoeing around the word suicide for that matter.
Yeah.
Being able to say self harm and suicide, using the right terminology,
Yeah.
died by suicide or attempted suicide. All of those little
Nice.
things make a lot of difference.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a
Yes,
great
no problem.
conversation.
I'm glad I could help. Thank you so much.
Thank you.